Hi everyone, today we're going to be coding our second coding for Good Badge, and today we're going to be creating a game that basically catches falling candies. So before we get started in coding, I just want to show you what our final product is going to look like. So here we have some candies falling, and all you have to do is when you move your mouse, your bucket of candy moves as well, and you want to try to collect the candy, and if you miss, then your points on the top decrease. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like when you miss the candies. So my points are decreasing. And then once you hit 0 points, it displays a game over message and everything on the screen freezes. So now just take a minute to pause the tutorial here and go to Google Classroom and open up a template. It should look something like this, and this is basically a basis that we're going to use for coding our project today. So take a minute to pause it and find the template on Google Classroom. Okay, so now that you've found the template, we're actually going to get started coding. So we already have some things here for you, and we have some comments to help you kind of code and see where you're supposed to code to. So the first thing we've already done for you is we have a background. If you want to change the background, all you have to do is go into Sprites and Backgrounds, click Background, and then we have some backgrounds over here. So let's say I want to choose let's say I want to choose like this platformer backdrop 1. So instead of just copying this entire thing, all I want to do is just replace this part of the URL right before .png, and then that image will come up. So the next thing we have is we have an avatar, which is our candy bowl. You can change this if you want as well. Candy bowl kind of fits like the candy falling down, but if you want something different, you go into the same sprites and background section, click image, and then you can pick one of these images. And this image is known as avatar. So we created a variable for this image. To create a variable in JavaScript, all you have to do is type var. And then the name of this variable is avatar. So the next thing we want to do is we don't want our avatar, our bowl showing up in the middle of the screen. We want it kind of in the bottom, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say avatar.y. And this basically gets us our y position of the avatar. And let's say min y. Let's see what this does. It puts it all the way on the bottom of the screen. So if you do want it there, you can put it there, but I want it somewhere up over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add 50 to that and see where it goes. So maybe I think 75 because I do want it a bit higher. So I think this is good for me. You can obviously change it. If you want it a bit higher, you can do plus 100. If you want it lower, you can do plus 50. So it really depends on your screen. Now, the next thing we want to do is make our avatar move. Right now, it's not moving with my mouse, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into this forever loop. And we're going to make the avatar move. So to make the avatar move left or right, we're going to use our x coordinates. So we're going to say avatar.x. So before we did avatar.y, which told it the bowl how up or down we wanted it to go. This time we want it to go left or right. And we want it to be at whatever coordinate our mouse is. So if our mouse is over here, we want our bowl to follow our mouse. So what we want to do next is we want to create a score variable. So on the top in our other screen over here, we had a score variable. We're just going to go back here and create a score variable. We're going to call it, we'll just call it score. Whoops. We want to go right below your forever loop and we want to create a variable called score. So to create our variable, we're going to type var and then the name of our variable, which is just score. And we're going to set this equal to 1. Because later in the program, what we're going to do is we're going to check if our score is equal to 0. And if it's 0, that means we've missed all of our candies and we want the game to end. So obviously we don't want the game to end as soon as we start it. So we're just going to set our score to 1 for now. The next thing we're going to be working with are clones. So right now we only have one candy image and we're creating this over here. So instead of creating like 10 or 15 variables for one item, we're just going to create clones of them, which are basically just copies. So in this every loop, it's basically what it says. So every 2 seconds, we want a new candy to drop. And it's going to have this URL. So if you want to change the URL, you can make it like a bird. So you just copy the part where it says bird and replace it with the bubbles candy. So we want to set the location of our candy falling. We want it to start off at the very top of the screen, which means our y coordinate, which tells it how up or down it's going to be, is going to be max y. So the maximum value it can be. And then we're going to put a comma. So that's how it's going to look when it starts off. On the next line, we're going to tell it to go to an x value. But we want this value to be random. We don't want our candy falling the exact same time or at the exact same position every single time, because then it's not really a fun game, right? So we're going to go say random x. And then we're going to put some parentheses at the end. So we can see here, it's making random x values. But they're not really falling, right? So we're going to actually make the clones fall just in like 30 seconds. But before we do that, we want to make sure we're keeping track of all these clones. So we're going to store it in a list. We already have a list created up here, but it's empty. There's nothing in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to type clones, which is the name of our list, dot push. And this is going to add our clone into our list. We're going to push our clone object or our image into our clones list. So just so we can keep track of it. Okay, so now we want our clones or our candy or whatever you want to call them, we want them to fall. So what we're going to do is we're going to type clone.y. Because we didn't really create a variable for our candy. We didn't call it candy or something. We were just creating clones. So for each clone that we're making, we want the y position to decrease by 3. So this is about how fast it's going to fall. If you want to make it slower, you can make it 2. If you want to make it faster, you can make it 5. Faster it is, the higher the number is, and the harder the game is going to be. I'm just going to make mine 2 for now, or 3. So what this minus equals does, it basically just removes the value of 3 from the y position that it's already at. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to check whether it's falling off the screen, right? And if it's falling off the screen, we just want to delete the clone. We don't want it to go super far off the screen. So inside this if statement where it says true, we're going to delete the word true and type clone.y is less than min y. That means basically if it's off the screen. So if it goes off the screen, we want something to happen, right? So the first thing we want to happen is we want to delete the clone. So to do that, we're just going to type clone.delete. That's pretty simple, right? But we're deleting this clone, which means it doesn't exist anymore. So we can also remove it from the list. Up here, we pushed it to this clones list so that we could keep track of it. So now we're just going to remove it from the list. we're going to say clones dot remove. And then once we put clone, so clone is our variable or our candy, and clones is the list. So from the list of clones, we're removing our one clone that went off the screen. So the last thing we want to do is we want to decrease the score if it goes off the screen, right? We don't want to give points for anything. So we're just going to type score minus minus. And all this does is it decreases the score by 1. So just take a minute to pause the tutorial here and get this part set up so that we can move on to the next thing. And then unpause when you're done with this. Okay, so let's say that our other condition is that if it doesn't go off the screen, that means it is touching our candy bowl, right? But right now I'm trying to catch the candy and it's not really working, right? So what I want to do is I want to delete our clone when it touches our candy bowl. To do that, I'm going to say clone.delete, like we did before. So when it touches our candy bowl, it looks like it's falling into the candy bowl because it's deleting. So since we're deleting the candy clone, we also want to remove it from the list. So like we did before, we want to say clones.remove, and we're going to remove this clone that's touching our avatar or our candy bowl. The last thing we want to do is we want to increase our score, right? We want to gain points if our candy bowl is touching our candy. So right now it's falling, it's deleting the candies when we're touching the bowl and when it's going off the screen. But we have our score increasing, but we don't even know our score. We can't even see it. So we're going to scroll down over here to where it says we need to display our score. So on line 90, it should be around line 90 for everyone. You should see these two quotation marks right next to text. And this is basically going to display our text. So the first thing we want to type inside the quotations is points. And when you type this, it should show up in red on your screen, and that's how you know it's in the quotations. If it doesn't show up in red, that means it's not inside the quotations. And then once you do that, it should automatically save and run. So then it should show points on the top over here. But it doesn't show our actual score. So what we want to do is we stored our score in a variable. We're going to say outside of the quotations, and this is super, super important, we want to put plus score. So we want to make sure it's outside of the quotations and in black. And this is because score is a variable. We don't want it to just type score. We want it to type our variable score. And so now we can see our points, and our points are increasing and decreasing based on whether they touch our candy bowl. Last thing we want to do is we have our game over images. So we have one that's just a game over image and one that's a you win image. Next thing we do over here is we want to hide the images as soon as the game begins. So that's already done for us because we don't want them to show up as soon as we start the game. We want them to show up at the very end. So since we have two ending screens, we're just going to create a variable for our ending screens, kind of like a list with our clones. So to create a list or an array, we're going to say var ending screens. So before we had an empty list that looked kind of like this, just two square brackets. And these square brackets are right above the line that says enter on your keyboard. Inside this list, we're going to type the names of our two game over messages or our winning messages. We're going to type game over 2, comma, you win. And make sure that you capitalize these correctly. So the O in game over is capitalized and the W in you win is capitalized. And when we code, sometimes it gets a bit confusing for the computer when it sees things that aren't spelled the same. So we want to be super, super careful about what we capitalize and what we don't. Okay, so if our score is 0 or below, we want to display our game over message. And if it's above 15, we want to display the you win. But over here right now, our score is negative, which means it's below 0. But it's not displaying anything, right? So what we're going to do is inside our forever loop, we're going to continuously check if our score is less than or equal to 0. We're just going to take out all the stuff in our parentheses, and we're going to say score less than or equal to 0. And then these two curly braces show up. And once you click next to the braces, they highlight in green. So we want to type in between those two braces. So if our score is 0, we want the game to freeze. So let's see if that works. Oh, we have to miss some. So let's just skip these 3. And our game freezes. But we also want our ending screen for our game over to show. So to do that, we're going to use something called indexes. In a list, computers always start counting from 0. They never start counting from 1 like we do. So this is our 0th item, and this is our first item. So you win is actually number 1, and game over is 0. So we want to show our game over message. To do that, we're going to actually call our list. We're going to say ending screens, and inside our square brackets, we're going to type 0. And we're just going to type dot show, which is going to make it show up. And so our game over message shows up on the top. So over here, just like as a summary or a recap, what we did was we have our score. We're checking if it's less than 0, which means our points are either 0 or negative. And we want to freeze the game. We want to freeze our bowl, we want to freeze our candy, we want to freeze everything, and we want our game over image to show as our ending screen. So now let's do something like that just for our winning screen. So if, let's say our score is greater than 15. So score greater than or equal to 15. What do we want to happen? We want the game to freeze again, right? So we're going to type freeze, parentheses, and a semicolon. So this time we want our other ending screen to show. So remember, this is the 0th item, game over is 0, and you win is 1. So we're going to type in ending screens, square brackets, 1. We want this to show, so we're just going to type dot show parentheses. So as coders, we always want to test our code. So I think now that we've finished all our code, it would be a good time to test. So I'm just going to try to score 15 points, right? Because we want our winning screen to show. So I'm just going to play the game until we get 15 points and see if it actually works. And if not, then we know that we've made a mistake and we have to go back through our code and test it out again. So I'm at 15 now, and it displays a you win message. I'm not able to move the bowl, and everything works. So now let's try it out with our other condition, which is 0. So let's see. This makes it 0, our candies froze, I'm not able to move the bowl, and it's displaying my game over message. So congratulations, you're done with your second coding for good badge, and you should be super, super proud of yourself. And make sure to show your friends and family your new game, which you can play, and you can teach them all that you learned about clones, about backgrounds, sprites, moving avatars across the screen, making candies fall, etc. And make sure you also, if you want to earn your third coding for good badge, or if you haven't earned your first coding for good badge, you can always email us, or you can check out our Google Classrooms, and we have the information and tutorials for that as well. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this project, and I look forward to seeing you next time.